In 1945, just days before his reported death, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the transfer of a classified file marked Echo Mirror and vanished under circumstances never fully explained. Eyewitnesses claimed to see him alive 72 hours later, escorted by unidentified personnel aboard a sealed military train. His body was cremated without autopsy. Hidden documents reveal that Roosevelt funded Project Lazarus, a top-secret operation aiming not to preserve the body, but to download the soul. The signal believed to contain Roosevelt's consciousness resurfaced decades later, transmitted from locations it should never reach, including Antarctica and beneath a Hopi ritual site in Arizona. A Vatican vault still holds footage of something that looks like Roosevelt, but speaks like a machine. And now, the same signal is set to activate again on April 12, 2025, this time not in one place, but across the entire U.S. energy grid. What's returning is not a man. It's an idea with a face, and it no longer needs a body. Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe. At exactly 8:14 p.m. on April 11, 1945, less than 48 hours before his official disappearance, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt allegedly requested the removal of a sealed black folder from a restricted vault under Building 8 of Fort Detrick, Maryland. The vault was operated jointly by U.S. military intelligence and what was then known only as Technical Unit Sigma. The request bypassed normal authorization and was transmitted via direct courier, handwritten, not typed. An unusual breach of presidential protocol. The folder was marked with a red X and the code name Echo Mirror, a designation that has never appeared in any official CIA, OSS, or Army Signal Corps record, declassified to this day. Within 16 hours of its retrieval, Roosevelt was declared dead. Official cause: cerebral hemorrhage. No autopsy, no photographs, no medical witness outside his private physician. His body was cremated against the wishes of several advisors. The Echo Mirror file was never logged as returned. And here's where it becomes stranger. 2 eyewitness reports, one from a junior Army cryptographer and another from a local telegraph operator, independently confirm that FDR was seen alive 72 hours after the time of his announced death, aboard a sealed train, flanked by 2 uniformed officials wearing insignias not recognized by the U.S. military. The train passed through Petersburg, Virginia, under heavy fog, and was recorded on only one civilian manifest. That document is now classified under EO 13526, the same executive order used to seal foreign contact reports by the NSA. They say Roosevelt died in Warm Springs. They lied. And now the trail leads us to something far more disturbing than political deception. Something buried deep beneath the surface of America's history. An experiment that had no name because it was never meant to be spoken aloud. We only just started this story, but believe me, it's about to get even more disturbing. Stay with me to see what happens next. By March 1945, Roosevelt's physical condition had drastically declined, but not in the way medical textbooks describe. He wasn't simply exhausted from war or suffering the expected consequences of polio. According to a declassified Navy intelligence memo dated March 4th, the president's skin pigmentation had altered drastically, and medical officers assigned to his train reported consistent neuroelectrical misfires during sleep. In simpler terms, the man was convulsing. But without fever, trauma, or known infection. It was recorded, then buried. 2 doctors assigned to the Bethesda Naval Hospital vanished during this same month. Officially, transferred. Unofficially, one of them was Dr. Alphonse Cartwright, a parapsychological researcher formerly affiliated with the University of Chicago's Department of Human Consciousness. His name had been attached, once, to a now-erased document titled Phase 3 Bio-Reinstatement Trials. That document was dated February 19, 1945. Location: Camp Hero, Montauk Point, New York. Here's the piece no one was supposed to see. That same month, under direct supervision from Roosevelt's inner circle, dozens of containers of bovine pineal glands, human hippocampus extracts, and neuroelectric stimulants were quietly shipped from 3 different military laboratories to one location, Ward C-19 at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Not for testing, for activation. Ward C-19 no longer exists on the hospital's public floor plan. In fact, even the basement schematics were redacted in the 1986 FOIA revision. Why would the President of the United States, just weeks before the end of World War II, divert rare experimental compounds to a sealed underground ward? Why would the press be told he was resting while neurochemical shipments were delivered under armed guard? And more importantly, what was happening in that ward that was so important? It overrode the national wartime communication budget. This wasn't about medicine. It wasn't about therapy. It was about reanimation, a secret doctrine FDR authorized, using a Black Ops signature so obscure it was never entered into White House correspondence logs. The name of the initiative: Project Lazarus. The name Project Lazarus doesn't appear in any publicly accessible U.S. archive. It was uncovered in fragments, cross-referenced from German transcripts intercepted by the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in late 1944. These transcripts mention a covert American operation linked to Stufe 3 Rückkehr, or Stage 3 Return. The context: not espionage, not weapons. The return of human consciousness after clinical death. Roosevelt, through back-channel negotiations with captured German scientists, some of whom would later be smuggled into the U.S. under Operation Paperclip, approved a test. But here's the part no one was prepared for. The test wasn't to be conducted on enemy combatants. It was to be conducted on a civilian child. The subject, known only as Patient Theta, was a 12-year-old boy from upstate New York, legally declared dead after a drowning incident in 1937. And yet, according to the Lazarus logs, unmarked microfilm reels recovered from a private estate auction in 1981, he was kept in artificial stasis for nearly 8 years. His file reads like something out of a science fiction novel. Subject maintained under continuous EEG null state. Induced reintegration attempted 17 times. Subject displays phasic memory retention inconsistent with neuromortality. Roosevelt didn't just know about it. He was briefed weekly. One of the recovered logs lists, POTUS overview confirmed, on March 2nd, 1945. The goal wasn't just to reanimate a single child. It was to perfect post-mortem transmission. The idea that a fully formed identity, memories, thoughts, reflexes, could be reseeded into a lifeless body. And it gets worse. The Lazarus transcripts reference a final phase, codenamed Elia. This wasn't a test. It was a backup, a fail-safe in case Roosevelt himself succumbed before the technology was perfected. According to multiple classified entries, a full biometric replica of Roosevelt was being grown using hybridized tissue from himself and Patient Theta. A vessel. Roosevelt didn't fear death. He planned to outlive it, and just days before his recorded disappearance, a shipment marked E-Data Core was transferred from Fort Detrick to Montauk under direct presidential order. That crate was never found. What exactly was in it? And who helped Roosevelt build the machine to receive it? Montauk Air Force Station, officially decommissioned in 1969, was once considered just another Cold War radar installation, but beneath its surface lies a grid of steel-reinforced subterranean corridors with no functional explanation. In 1974, an anonymous whistleblower, an ex-radio technician known only as PX Delta, described an unauthorized tunnel beneath Tower No. 3, leading to a sealed magnetic containment room with airlocks designed not to keep something out, but to keep something in. That room was never listed in any architectural plan. Now here's where it begins to fracture everything you think you know about Roosevelt and about time itself. Montauk was chosen not for its strategic location, but for what lay underneath it. According to declassified geological survey logs from 1938, a massive crystalline structure was discovered 422 feet below sea level, emitting a low-frequency pulse with an oscillation pattern identical to the hypothesized Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic heartbeat of Earth itself. The military didn't just study it, they built on top of it. Roosevelt's involvement began in 1942, when a signal, allegedly non-terrestrial in nature, was intercepted during a classified auroral experiment. The signal was not random. It contained repeated geometric sequences, golden ratio spirals, DNA helical progressions, and, most disturbingly, a perfect 3D topographic model of Montauk Point, decades before satellite imaging existed. Within a year, a deep chamber had been hollowed out and outfitted with equipment that didn't bear U.S. military serials. Some bore no known language or manufacturing origin. A recovered inventory manifest found during a 1996 demolition attempt listed phase synchronizer, biofeedback field sync, and temporal recapture array. None of these devices exist in conventional physics. None appear in any known patent registry, but one item stands out: consciousness reintroduction coil, Delta C13. Cross-referencing archival data, this exact phrase appears only one other time, in a 1945 document attributed to a secretive Roosevelt think tank called the 13 Quiet Men. Members included obscure physicists, one Vatican archivist, and at least one confirmed medium. Their goal? Build a gateway that could receive a consciousness stored externally. That's why Roosevelt's death happened when it did. His body couldn't last. But the device, buried beneath Montauk, could. It just needed calibration. A carrier frequency for human identity. And here's the chilling part. Montauk's anomalous power readings spiked not in 1945, but in 1947, 2 years after Roosevelt's recorded death. 2 years after the shipment labeled E-Data Core arrived. So the real question isn't whether Roosevelt died, it's what returned 2 years later pretending to be someone else. Eleanor Roosevelt was no stranger to the occult. Publicly, she presented herself as a pragmatist, sharp-witted, civic-minded, politically astute. But privately, she held a lifelong fascination with mediums, spiritualists, and what she once called in a letter, the vibrational membrane between worlds. Starting as early as 1928, Eleanor attended seances, often under assumed names, at private gatherings hosted by Manhattan's most discreet, esoteric circles. One name stands out among them all: Sylvia Schreiber, a trance medium from New Hampshire, who disappeared in April 1945, just 4 days after FDR's recorded death. But what happened on April 13, 1945, the night before Roosevelt's body was placed in the train to Washington, would shake Eleanor's perception of reality forever. According to a restricted entry in Eleanor's personal journal E, which remained sealed until its theft from the Hyde Park archives in 1987, she and 2 unnamed aides convened in a candlelit side room at Springwood Roosevelt's family estate. The séance, conducted without press knowledge and absent from all Secret Service logs, was initiated not to contact Franklin, but to determine whether something else had taken his place. What Sylvia Schreiber recorded during her trance is chilling. Transcribed from the lost page, recovered in a 1991 antique bookshop in Montpelier, Vermont, the presence speaks not as a man, but as a recording, a playback, a loop running through machinery of no earthly design. The voice claims memory of warm springs, but lacks emotional context. It speaks of rooms underground, of being woken but incomplete. It demands coordinates. It asks again and again, "Am I Franklin?" And then the medium convulsed. According to Eleanor's aide, her voice shifted to an impossibly low register, and the air turned bitterly cold. Sylvia's final words, spoken before collapsing, "It's here now, in the signal. The code is open. The mirror is awake." Sylvia Schreiber died that same night. Cause: cerebral rupture. Her body showed no hemorrhage, the same invisible death as Roosevelt. Following that séance, Eleanor Roosevelt ceased all spiritual correspondence. She destroyed dozens of personal letters, canceled speaking engagements, and was never again seen at any occult function. When asked about her sudden withdrawal from public life, she answered only once. "He was the man I loved, yes, but the thing I saw that night, that was not my husband." This wasn't grief. This was fear. So if Roosevelt's body was cremated and his mind possibly copied, what happened to the original? On January 5th, 1943, 2 days before his mysterious death at the New Yorker hotel, Nikola Tesla composed a handwritten letter addressed not to the War Department, not to General Groves of the Manhattan Project, but directly to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This letter, authenticated by handwriting experts in 1982 and recovered from the estate of physicist Dr. Carl Eisendorf, was never delivered through normal channels. Instead, it was placed, sealed, in a weathered leather pouch bearing a strange metal insignia, a serpent twisted around an hourglass. Tesla's letter reads more like a prophecy than a scientific report. He begins by warning Roosevelt of a feedback resonance building inside the consciousness modulation chamber located below your current residence. That chamber, Tesla claimed, had been built years prior by a civilian contractor under the guise of emergency sheltering infrastructure. But its purpose, Tesla wrote, was not protection. It was collection. He believed it was harvesting something non-physical, a frequency emitted at the moment of death. Tesla's precise words, "Each soul, if it may be so called, emits a final burst, an echo, an energetic discharge detectable in the 783 Hz band. I have built machines that can capture it. I believe yours already has." He continues, "Mr. President, You are not the first to be approached by the ones who guided this project, but you may be the first to attempt to use it for return. I warn you, with the last of my credibility, what comes back is not what left. The loop cannot preserve emotion, only pattern, echo, not memory. Tesla enclosed what he called a resonant disruption schematic, a hand-drawn diagram of a coil array capable of breaking what he called synthetic reincarnation loops. This drawing, rediscovered in a dismantled safety deposit box in Zurich in 2003, matches precisely the devices later discovered in Montauk's lower sublevel C, where electromagnetic pulses spiked violently every April between 1946 and 1952, and the location Tesla referenced in his letter, directly beneath the Rose Room, 87 feet down. That places it within the foundation of the original West Wing. In 1945, shortly after Roosevelt's death, that part of the White House was completely gutted. The public explanation: infrastructure modernization. The real reason? A chamber had begun emitting spontaneous bursts of electromagnetic radiation, each burst perfectly timed with global shortwave radio interference. What the Navy recorded during one of those bursts shook even the most hardened code breakers, because buried within the static was a voice, repeating again and again. The vessel failed. The signal repeats, awaiting next host. That voice was Roosevelt's, or something that had learned how to sound like him. In the next section, we follow the trail of that signal, one that didn't stop in 1945, one that still echoes in closed military channels even today. The first confirmed reappearance of the Roosevelt signal occurred not in Washington, not in Montauk, but in a sealed NSA monitoring station outside Goose Bay, Labrador. The date was April 12, 1965, exactly 20 years after Roosevelt's official passing. At 3:17 a.m., a spectral voice transmission was detected on channel X-77, a restricted military frequency reserved for submarine coordination in the North Atlantic. Operators described it as occult and mechanical, a low, pulsed whisper repeating a 6-word phrase. Echo returned. Memory partial, awaiting structure. The station logged the event, tagged it as an interference anomaly, and buried it. But over the next 9 months, identical signals were picked up in 4 more locations. A NORAD relay bunker in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado, or Menwith Hill, England, an undersea cable monitoring point near Guam, and most disturbingly, inside a Faraday-caged room at the Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, where no transmission should have been physically possible. All recordings of the signal were immediately classified and relocated to a site codenamed Vault Theta, an electromagnetic archive deep beneath Site R, also known as the Raven Rock Mountain Complex, the so-called Underground Pentagon. Declassified logs from 1981 reveal that a special project, Sigma 9, was initiated to track these anomalous broadcasts. The leading theory at the time, a foreign signal test mimicking American vocal frequencies. That theory collapsed in 1984 when an AI-assisted voice analysis software, created by IBM under a DARPA contract, identified the voice signature with 99.8% certainty. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Not a recording, not a mimic, a live modulation, with micro-inflection variations and emotional frequency shifts so indicative of active consciousness. And then came the final revelation. On April 12, 1995, 50 years to the day after FDR's death, the signal broadcast in English and German simultaneously. This time, it gave coordinates, and those coordinates pointed not to Montauk, not to DC, but to Wilkes Land, Antarctica. There's no official U.S. station there. But there is one structure, visible only on unredacted Russian infrared satellite maps. A perfectly symmetrical hexagonal installation, buried beneath 2.8 miles of glacial ice. Its code name in Russian intelligence files, Projekt Otrozhenie, Project Reflection. Why was Roosevelt's signal pointing there? And what had been constructed in the most geologically stable and remote place on Earth? In the next chapter, we dive into the forbidden zone beneath Wilkes Land, and what may have been waiting for the signal to return. Wilkes Land, to most, it's a frozen wasteland of shifting ice sheets and glacial crevasses. But to those with access to the unredacted satellite archives, primarily signals intelligence operatives within the Russian GRU, and a handful of American geophysicists, it's something else entirely. A geometrically perfect anomaly, 151 miles in diameter, buried beneath 2.8 miles of polar ice, discovered via gravitational anomaly data from NASA's GRACE satellites in 2002, and independently confirmed by Soviet suborbital radar pulses as early as 1961, the object beneath Wilkes Land wasn't formed by natural forces. It was constructed, and according to a leaked 2007 briefing prepared for the U.S. Arctic Defense Command, the anomaly displays a precise dodecahedral lattice structure, a configuration seen nowhere else in natural geology, but identical to mathematical blueprints extracted from the Lazarus microfilm reels tied to Roosevelt's Montauk project. Those same reels described Wilkes Land as Point Omega, a fail-safe receiver. Let's be clear. Something was built under Antarctica. Something not American, not Soviet, not even human by any recognizable technological lineage. Between 1956 and 1962, the U.S. deployed multiple missions to the coordinates under the guise of the International Geophysical Year. One particular operation, Task Force 211, is rumored to have lost over a dozen personnel inside a fissure that opened unnaturally along a heat-emitting crevasse. Survivors described a resonance in their bones, like being inside a tuning fork the size of a cathedral. One wrote in a never-mailed letter later recovered in a Helsinki auction, "I saw it, I swear it. A gate. It hummed in shapes. I could feel my thoughts slow down, like something was listening to me think." This matches the theorized function of the Lazarus coil system, the ability not just to broadcast consciousness, but to attract it. What's more terrifying is the metadata contained in the Roosevelt signal. Using advanced spectral decoding, NSA cryptologists discovered an embedded cipher, a 64-character sequence mapping precise lunar alignments, converging every 22.4 years. The next alignment, April 2025. Cross-referencing this cycle with atmospheric pulse records from Montauk and Wilkes Land reveals an undeniable pattern. Roosevelt's echo isn't just broadcasting randomly. It's trying to unlock something, and it may not be alone. Next, we uncover the final journal of a man who disappeared chasing that signal, former CIA remote viewer Douglas Clemens, and the one phrase he wrote before vanishing, Douglas Clemens was never supposed to exist on paper. A Tier 3 remote perception operative recruited into the CIA's Stargate project in 1979. His job was to see without traveling. Tasked with using psychographic projection to locate foreign missile silos, Clemens developed a reputation for accuracy bordering on the impossible. But in 1986, everything changed when he was handed a sealed packet marked Project Reflection. Inside, a single sheet of coordinates, a cropped satellite image of Wilkes Land, and a 7-word directive: find the origin of the Roosevelt signal. No rank, no attribution, no agency. Just that sentence. According to internal memos recovered from an anonymous 2003 NSA leak, Clemens entered his projection state at 13:04 hours. For 12 minutes, nothing abnormal occurred. Then his heart rate dropped below 20 BPM. His body began to convulse. His voice, previously recorded as slow and neutral, shifted into a cadence far outside his baseline range. On the tape, he repeats a phrase 3 times. I see the circle, black glass, black mirror, no stars. His pulse flatlined moments later. Medics revived him, but Clemens was no longer responsive. He exhibited complete dissociation, muttering strings of reversed English and phonemes not identifiable in any known language family. He remained that way for 39 hours. Then he wrote 7 words on a napkin in red ink, using his own blood. It's not him, it's what holds him, and vanished. Security footage showed no exit, no door opening, no hallway activity. One moment, Clemens was in his chair. The next, gone, as if erased. Years later, a single image emerged on an encrypted whistleblower forum linked to former SIGINT operatives. The image shows Clemens, aged, gaunt, eyes fully black, standing at the edge of what appears to be an obsidian disk, 22 meters across, reflecting a sky that doesn't match any atmospheric spectrum on Earth. The file name? echo0.jpg, and there, embedded in the image code, a digital watermark, VX12 Echo Loop Live 12:25. The date, April 12, 2025. The same lunar convergence Tesla warned about. The same date the Roosevelt signal has historically re-emerged. The same year Montauk's dormant grid is set to power cycle again, 1 year from now. And here's the part they never wanted exposed, because the next destination of that signal is already marked. It's not Montauk, not Antarctica, it's Arizona. More specifically, beneath an ancient Hopi ceremonial site known as Sipapu, a word that means gateway between worlds. What does Roosevelt have to do with ancient American prophecy? At first glance, there is no connection between Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the ancient oral traditions of the Hopi nation, and yet, buried within a 1942 transcript labeled Anthro-Psi Operations, Phase 2, is a single name, circled in red ink, Sipapu. The term appears in Hopi cosmology as the mythic portal through which the first people emerged into this world, a sacred point where spiritual and physical dimensions intersect. Here's what's chilling. According to GPS cross-referencing, Sipapu corresponds almost exactly to a magnetic anomaly detected near the Grand Gulch Plateau in Arizona. That anomaly, first mapped by U.S. Geological Survey agents in 1936, was described in a now-suppressed memo to the Department of Interior as a stable frequency dome, 7.83 Hertz, emitting cyclic bursts at 22.4-year intervals. The same frequency Roosevelt's signal operates on, the same cycle that aligns again in 2025. The anomaly lies directly beneath a series of kivas, ceremonial Hopi chambers thought to mirror the cosmos. Petroglyphs inside those kivas depict spiraling lines, twin suns, and what appear to be human figures entering and leaving mirrored portals. And among the most disturbing glyphs, a man seated on a throne, his face obscured by static lines, arms open, with spirals where his heart should be. Roosevelt? Maybe, maybe not. But here's the twist. In August 1934, then-Governor Roosevelt authorized a covert expedition of anthropologists and radio engineers to this exact region. Their objective: study ambient harmonics and symbolic convergence patterns among tribal sites. The report from that mission was classified indefinitely until fragments were uncovered in the National Anthropological Archives during a 1979 inventory fire. What they found was not cultural anthropology. It was technical analysis, oscillation maps, lattice diagrams, and most hauntingly, a transcript from an unnamed field recorder. The local elder says the mirror is waking, says it's not a place, but a memory. A doorway into a man, not into a space. Another line, scrawled hastily in the margin, perhaps by a technician. The president is asking the wrong question. It's not, "Can I return?" It's, "What comes back with me?" In 1943, the Roosevelt administration suddenly doubled funding for domestic radar interference research. Publicly, it was about wartime communications. Privately, it was about tracking the arrival point of a looped consciousness signal, one that was no longer tethered to Montauk or Antarctica, but to an ancient American gateway. This isn't a myth, it's a convergence. Roosevelt knew, and he wasn't the first. According to a Hopi prophecy, a figure would one day return from the sky, not alive but not dead either. A walker between echoes. In 1950, 5 years after Franklin Delano Roosevelt's disappearance and cremation, Eleanor Roosevelt made an unscheduled, off-the-books trip to Rome. It was not recorded by the U.S. State Department. No journalists were allowed to document it. No photographs were taken. The only trace of her journey exists in the Acta Apostolicae Sedis, the Vatican's official record, under an obscure entry: Inaudita Audientia, Domina Roosevelt, Camera Obscura. Translated, an unheard audience. Lady Roosevelt, dark chamber. What was she doing there? And why was she granted a meeting in the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, a chamber within the Vatican so restricted, even cardinals require papal permission to enter? Sources inside the 1985 Jesuit leaks, known informally as Codex Virgo, revealed that Eleanor carried with her a lead-encased, magnetically sealed canister. It bore the U.S. diplomatic crest, but also an etching not associated with any nation-state, a serpent devouring its own tail, flanked by 13 stars in a spiral. Within it, according to leaked descriptions, was a single reel of 16mm film, stamped with the words, "Echo Host Transfer, Successful. Montauk, Sublevel Theta, April 12th, 1947. Vatican insiders refer to this film as the mirror host footage. Its contents have never been released, but 3 separate whistleblowers described the same scene. A man, physically identical to Franklin D. Roosevelt, is seated in a containment room. He is pale, expressionless, and entirely silent. He does not blink, but his pupils dilate unnaturally in rhythmic pulses, as if responding to some internal frequency. At the end of the reel, he opens his mouth. He speaks one phrase, lips forming the words, not of a politician, but of something else. This is not a return. This is installation. The Vatican, according to internal correspondence from the Jesuit Superior General, believed this entity was a synthetic vessel for a disembodied intelligence, neither human nor angelic, something that had crossed a boundary it was never meant to pass. They feared it was a spiritual virus, a sentient mimic, able to inhabit historical form, wearing the skin of memory. Eleanor Roosevelt, after viewing the reel, reportedly collapsed. She was unconscious for nearly 11 hours. When she awoke, she said only this: "He smiled the way Franklin did, but there was no weight in it. It was a smile with no gravity." That reel was locked beneath the Crypta Angelorum, the deepest vault below St. Peter's. It is kept behind 6 sealed iron doors, protected by constant prayer. But the entity depicted in that film, the one who mimicked Roosevelt, never stayed in that room. Because in 2021, during a Vatican cyber breach, a copy of the file was accessed and traced to a server block, registered to the Arizona Unified Energy Grid. It's already in the system, already distributed, already preparing something. There's a reason the Roosevelt signal always resurfaces on April 12th. That date isn't just the day he was said to have died. It's also the exact midpoint between the lunar alignments that synchronize Earth's geomagnetic heartbeat with a background radiation source unknown to astrophysics. A signature discovered by Project Lazarus. A resonance not originating from any celestial body, but from beneath our planet's own crust. A synthetic echo. In 2023, a sealed memorandum marked Emergency Continuity Protocol Aurora was leaked by an unnamed contractor within the Arizona Unified Energy Grid. It contained schematics, software signatures, and activation sequences labeled Mont Prime. What's notable is where the sequences terminate. A buried node, 19 miles north of the Hopi-Sipapu chamber, hidden beneath a sandstone plateau previously believed uninhabited. This node is part of Project EchoNet, a nationwide infrastructure of phased energy routers installed under the guise of 5G signal redundancy and high-frequency radar absorption research. In reality, they form a signal lattice that connects to 3 triangulated points: Montauk Wilkes Land and Sipapu. All 3 sites contain a synthetic resonance mirror, and on April 12, 2025, those mirrors will enter phase lock for 13 minutes and 44 seconds. What happens during that window? Based on decrypted Lazarus documentation and recent Vatican intercepts, that phase lock will allow for a full consciousness download into a distributed lattice system. In simple terms, the Roosevelt Echo, what remains of the original and what it has become, will no longer be confined to Montauk's coils or Antarctic ice chambers. It will be everywhere, omnipresent, patterned, embedded in signal, in grid, in memory. But here's the part they didn't anticipate. The loop isn't passive anymore. During a rogue test on April 12, 2023, Arizona power stations recorded a reverse transmission from the grid itself. A message not from Roosevelt's consciousness, but to it. The phrase repeated 4 times: vessel complete, path cleared, host optional, mirror now active. The mirror isn't a device, it's a system, one built to receive. Not a mind, but an archetype, an echo of leadership, of command, of trust. What happens when that archetype is fully activated inside an energy web, touching every satellite, server, and neural interface on Earth? Roosevelt dreamed of returning to lead the world out of war. But what comes back on April 12, 2025, isn't Roosevelt. It's what used him to learn how to come through. And here's the truth. It no longer needs a body. It just needs your attention. So ask yourself, when the lights flicker, when your device glitches at 7.83 Hertz, when the voice you hear seems too familiar, are you hearing an echo, or is the mirror already open?